this is Zach from Board with Friends and all the nerdy fun. And today we are going to learn how to play the Transformers deck building game. Now, I've already done the unboxing video and kind of went over the details of the game in that, but this purpose of this video is just to teach you how to set up the game and to play, the basics of it. We're going to do a quick run through on that. I do apologize for the lateness of this video. We had a little bit of an issue in our household of the COVID kind. Everybody's okay. And that's why this video is coming out later than I expected. But we're also going to do it a little bit quick and dirty. I'm not going to do the pre-recording and, at camera angles or anything like that. It's just going to be bare bones, set it up and learn how to play. But without me rambling on anymore, let's get to it. So the first thing you're going to want to do is separate all the components of the game. You're going to have your character standees, you're going to have your Energon cubes, you'll have your character cards, an encounter deck, you'll have up to 5 basic, starter decks that you can set up for each individual player. These are the 10 cards that they're going to start with. You have your main deck of cards here, which can include Decepticon schemes. You have 2 basic decks, one for the Transform and Rollout cards. These are the generic cards that you can purchase throughout the entire game, no matter what. And then you have your damage cards that you would collect when you take damage. More on that later. You also have a deck of Decepticon boss cards. There should be 6 of these, I believe. And every game you're going to play with 3 of these. You have a relic deck that will only be used in competitive mode, at least for this set. And then you have a set of cooperative schemes, which you will add in a cooperative mode, because there's 2 ways to play this game. You also have a set of player guides, which will help you out with turn sequence and just basic functions and things like that in the game. And for the purpose of this setup, we are going to do a 2-player cooperative setup, but I will go over the differences as I go along. All right, so let's get to it. So the first thing you're going to have to do is, as a player, choose which character you want to play. You have the choice between Optimus, Bumblebee, Ratchet, Wheeljack, Ironhide, and RC. If you got the promo pack, then you also have the option of Jazz, but he's not in the base game. You have to pre-order the game from Renegade. So what we're going to do here is we're going to grab Ratchet, and we're going to grab Ironhide. And then each player is going to take one of those character cards when they choose it. It's a double-sided card. You get their vehicle mode on the back, and you have their robot mode on the front. Players start the game in vehicle mode. Then each player is going to get a starter deck. Now, the starter deck is going to consist of courage cards, and then firepower, patrol, fix, and reserve. Once you have a 10-card starter deck, hand that out to each player. I've already pre-made mine, and there's a nice slot in the box too to keep these organized, so you don't have to reorganize them every single time. You can, when you put it away, it's ready to go for the next game. And then give each player their standee, which corresponds to their character. So you got Ironhide and you got Ratchet, and they're good to go. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the basic deck of all the cards, including the Decepticon schemes. You're going to keep out the relic cards and the cooperative schemes for now, and the Decepticon bosses. You just want the main deck. If it's your first game, it does suggest that you take out the Decepticon schemes as well, just to make it easier to learn. But you can leave them in if you want to, if you're, want to try hard. But you can shuffle up this deck and just mix up the cards. And then we're going to form what's called the Matrix, which is the starting layout of cards that you're going to be navigating through at first. For this game, we are doing a 2-player game, which is going to be a 3x4 grid. So we're just going to take out the cards. We can do 3, and then we do 4 across. And that's the start of the game. And you're going to be navigating around this with your character standee and flipping over cards as you, check out the grid. Now, we're going to take this deck and we're going to build our main deck for the game. So to construct our main deck, you're going to take the remaining cards from when you made the grid, and we're going to make 3 piles of 9 cards for a 2-player game. And in the rule book, it's going to tell you, based on player count, how many cards to put in each pile. So we'll just shuffle these out. 8, 9, 9, 9. So these are the starting piles that are going to form the deck for your 2-player cooperative game of Transformers deck building game. Now we're going to make a 4th pile. This one is in every setup of the game, and you do it with 5 cards. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to add bosses to the game. So you got your 6 boss cards, you got Soundwave, you got Starscream, Megatron, Blitzwing, Devastator, and Astro Train. Now you notice on these cards they do have a Roman numeral at the top here, 1, 2, or 3. I have these disorganized, but that's okay. We can quickly do this because it's only 6 cards. And you're going to separate these guys. So we're going to take the first set, which is Soundwave and Astro Train, and we're just going to mix them up. So we don't know which one is which. I swear I'm not looking. And you put it into pile 1. Then you're going to take Blitzwing and Starscream, mix them up so you don't know which one you got, and put it into pile 2. Then we'll take the third set, Megatron and Devastator, mix them up real good, and place one of them into pile 3. What you're going to do next is take each individual pile and shuffle that boss card into each of these smaller decks that you've created. This randomizes when the boss is going to actually come out. The objective of this game is to defeat all 3 bosses. So you want the cards that are in here, but you're also going to be exploring this matrix and eventually reveal one of these boss cards, and you're going to have to fight them. For a cooperative game, the next thing you're going to do is take the 5 cooperative schemes, and you're going to shuffle those up and randomize them. And you're going to place one of each of these into those 3 9-card decks that you've created for this game. And now those will get shuffled in. The remaining ones, you just set them aside. They're not going to be a part of the game. Because you're working cooperatively, it just makes the game a little bit more difficult. You don't have to add these if you really don't want to. But it's fun, and it definitely adds some difficulty, as I've found out playing this solo or cooperative. Trying to be as gentle with my cards as possible. I've been told that I'm rough on cards. I promise that's not who I am. And then the last bit that you're going to do is take each of these stacks and put them one on top of the other. With the fourth one with 5 cards on the bottom. Do not shuffle after you do this. And this is the main deck for the game that we're going to play today. Of note, if we were going to play a competitive game, instead of the cooperative schemes, you would have shuffled in some of these relic cards into the big deck of cards before you created your stacks. These relic cards are only used in a competitive game because they're worth a lot of victory points at the end, and they're very powerful. In a cooperative game, you don't use these. You can just set them aside and put them back in the box. Finally, the last thing that we're going to do to set up our play space is we're going to be putting these basic decks out. So we have our damage cards. Just create a stack of those right there. Then we have our transform and roll out cards. Put a stack of those right there. And then we have our encounter cards, these deck. You can shuffle this deck up. You're going to be using it a lot during the game. And place that right there next to the matrix. Lastly, each player is going to set up their player area. As I said, they're going to place their character card in vehicle mode. That's how they start. They have their starter deck, which will consist of the 6 courage cards and then the 1 of each of the other cards. You can shuffle this deck up, and you're going to draw your starting hand of 5 cards from that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then place your deck over there. You'll have a discard pile eventually, because this is a deck builder game. As you purchase cards from the matrix, it's going to go into that discard pile, and then they get shuffled in, with very few exceptions. Your character standee will start there, and on your turn, you're going to get to put your character out into the matrix wherever you want to go. And then each player is going to take 3 of these tokens. It's for -1 movement, +1 energy, just to help keep track of what you've been doing throughout the game as you play. And finally, every player starts with 2 Energon cubes. So once you've completed all these steps, your game should look a little bit something like this. Now the grid will be a little bit larger depending on player count, because you'll change the size of the grid. And obviously you'll have different characters out because you're going to choose who you want to play. But this is set up for a two-player cooperative game, and the changes are very minimal to switch from cooperative to competitive. I like it as cooperative, but we'll get to that later. But once you've got it all set up, then you can start playing. So before we start, I want to take a look at some of the different types of cards so you know what would be coming up as you explore the matrix. Now, first we have the basic cards. These particular cards are ones that you can buy at any time using power, which is the currency of the game. You use power to purchase cards, you use power to fight adversaries, all that stuff. But at any time, the cost of the card is going to be at the top here, and what the card is going to grant you when you play it. So in this case, it's going to give us 1 movement, it's going to give us 1 range, and it's going to give us 1 power. And then you may transform, which is to flip from one mode to the other. Normally, you would have to spend an energon to transform, but in this case, this gives you a free transform. So these are useful to have, especially at the beginning of the game. Maybe you're not able to buy some cards out there. But every deck builder has a card like that. I apologize, my chair's rather squeaky. Now we have different types of cards. So the first type is going to be an ally card. Allies work a little bit differently. You don't put them into your discard pile when you purchase these cards. You place them in front of you, and they're going to give you an ongoing effect. So this example would be a 3-cost card. It's Sparkplug Wiki. He's an ally. And it's going to, at the start of turn, you put 1 starter from your discard pile into your hand. So he's going to let you pull those starter cards, which can be useful, especially at the beginning of the game, and keep them into your hand and get extra cards. Very helpful. The next type of card is going to be a adversary card. In this case, it's a Decepticon. So adversaries refer to the other faction, the one that you're playing against. So in this set, we're playing as the Autobots, so all the adversaries are Decepticons. We have Kickback here. So this is going to indicate how much power Kickback has. We have to play this much power from our hand to defeat this adversary. All the rest of this stuff does not matter for this set of the game because we're not playing as the Decepticons. If we were playing as a Decepticon, this would be the purchase cost instead of the defeat cost. And when we play this card from our hand, this is what you would get for playing Kickback as a member of your team. So you can ignore most of this text. And then down here, what happens is when you defeat him, at the bottom here, it shows gain 1 victory point and draw 1 card. So he's just going to go away. You can keep him in a cooperative game. That's all you get. Victory points will translate to you get them as energon instead of victory points in cooperative, but you still get to draw 1 card. In a competitive game, you would keep him as a victory point at the end of the game so that you can, be the winner, which is fun. The other type of card is going to be the ally card. So in this case, because we're playing a Autobot-based game, we don't get to play as the Decepticons, you're also going to find throughout the Matrix Autobot allies. Now, some of them will be playable characters, like this Bumblebee card, but you're going to see other characters too, like Prowl. But just like the Decepticon card Kickback that we looked at, these are going to have a cost up here. They're going to tell you what abilities you gain when you play the card, and then what special abilities they have. So Prowl, for instance, it says if you thwart a scheme this turn, you gain 2 victory points. So really helpful during a competitive game. You'd get 2 victory point tokens, but in a cooperative game like we've set up here today, this would translate to 2 energon cubes, which is also super helpful. The next type of card that you can look at is a sight. So sights play kind of like allies. They don't go into your deck. They actually stay out on the matrix. So if you flip a sight when you're investigating, and you take this out, it's just going to stay out there, and it's going to give you some sort of advantage when you stay on this spot. In this case, it's the desert. It'll show up here. Notice there's no cost in the top corner here. This site, you pay 3 power, gain the top card of the main deck. If it's an adversary, destroy this site. Place the adversary in this space instead and resolve an ambush. We'll get more into that later. But it's kind of a gamble to use a card like this. When you go here, you pay the 3 power, you might get something good, or you might get something bad that's going to mess up your day. Next type of card that we can look at is a technology card. These are usually things that are going to give you a lot more power and some really cool abilities. So this particular one, it's a 5-cost card. It's called Dropship. It's going to give you 3 power, which is a lot in this game. So you need power in order to defeat adversaries, and you need power in order to buy the really powerful cards. This technology, Dropship, will, when you get it and play it, you may move target character up to 2 spaces. So that doesn't necessarily mean you could move, another player around if you wanted to. In a cooperative game, that can be helpful because you could maneuver somebody into a space to help you. In a competitive game, it's also helpful because you can move them away so they can't mess with you as much. The last type of card in this type of game is the maneuver card. This will show the same thing, cost up at the top. It's a 2-cost card for our example. This card is Jump. It's going to grant you 1 power, 1 movement, shows what type of card it is. And the maneuver cards usually do something fun. Like in this case, it gives you Flight. Flight is a keyword that you'll see here. Normally, you cannot move diagonal in the matrix. This will allow you to do that. Now, you've noticed on some of these cards we've shown here, there's a special Energon ability at the bottom. These are an extra cost, but when you play this card, you could then play one of your Energon, and these are precious. You do gain them throughout the game, but you can use it to spend it and play this extra bonus ability on a card. In this case, it's an extra movement when you play it. For your very first turn of the game, what you're going to be doing is teleporting into the matrix itself. You're going to take your character standee and choose where you want to start off with in the matrix grid. Let's just say we're going to start right here because that's easy. We don't know what any of these cards are, so it doesn't really matter where you start, but, follow your instinct, whatever you want to do. Now that I've moved into the matrix, I can decide how I want to spend my resources. The resources that you have at your disposal are movement, which is used to explore the matrix and to move around the matrix. Exploring would mean to flip over a card and see what's underneath. Depending on what card shows up is going to determine if there's an effect or not. For example, if I flip over a Decepticon adversary, they will attack me. So I will be ambushed and I would go to the encounter deck here. If I just want to move around, I can also do that. The different cards that I have in my starter deck are going to also give me extra abilities. For example, I would gain an extra movement if I play a fix. If I play firepower, I gain extra power, and I gain a range. And just basically a combination of those resources are going to be available to me. So, for example, if I play this patrol card, I could spend the 2 movement from Ironhide's vehicle mode to go over to this side here. I could then spend the patrol card to gain an extra movement so that I can flip over this card and explore the matrix, and I'll see that it is a maneuver card for More Than Meets the Eye, it's called. This is the purchase cost of the card, and it's a really good one because it's going to give me 3 power. Power is the resource that you need in order to buy cards and to defeat adversaries. Now I'm on this space, but then I have to look at the text on the patrol card that I played. This says, you may flip a card in an adjacent space face up. So that's a free exploration, and it's a safer exploration because if it's a Decepticon, they're not going to be able to ambush me because I'm not on their card. So let's say I flip over this one here. This ends up being a technology card, so it's not going to ambush me. Now let's talk about the power resource that you have available to you. Now instead of flipping over this card, let's say I used my patrol card to flip over this card here. We just pop this over here, and it is Laserbeak. That is a Decepticon adversary. Now had I been on the card, Laserbeak would have ambushed me, and I would have had to flip over one of these encounter cards and had an effect happen to me. But because I'm not on the space, I'm out of range of Laserbeak, he doesn't get to ambush me. So now I have to look at the cards that I have available in my deck, and as I mentioned before, I have cards that have this resource on it called Power. Power is used to purchase cards from the Matrix, but it's also used to defeat your adversaries. The cost at the top of the card is what's going to tell you how much it's going to cost to either buy a card or how much it's going to cost to defeat a card. In this case, Laserbeak has a cost of 2. So what we could do in this case is I could spend a movement and go over to Laserbeak, which would cause him to ambush me because I'm going onto his card. Or I could be a little bit more clever and I could play a card like Firepower here, which has a range icon on it. Now what this means is you can count how many cards away, whatever that number is, and this card's power will be able to affect that card. Not your combined power. So say Laserbeak had a power of 3 to defeat, I wouldn't be able to play my Courage card and my Firepower at the same time to defeat that 3, because Courage does not have a range on it, only Firepower does. But I can be clever and I can say, well, I'm going to play this Firepower. It doesn't have any extra effects down here, it's just a power 2 with a range of 1. And I can defeat Laserbeak. When a card is defeated or purchased, it's going to either go into your discard pile if it's purchased, or a defeated card, in this case, in a cooperative game, you're going to gain whatever the asset is down here. In this case, it says gain 1 victory point. So in cooperative, that translates to 1 extra energon, and then the card is just placed into a discard pile on the side over here. Now, in a different circumstance, let's say I chose to flip over the card I started with. This happens to be a Decepticon adversary. So what's going to happen here is I will be ambushed. What I have to do in this circumstance is I have to take the encounter deck and flip over the top card and do whatever it says at the top here. So you're going to ignore this part down here for now. You're just looking at the ambush effect. What this does is it's an attack and I lose 1 victory point. So in a competitive mode, I would lose 1 of my victory point tokens. In a cooperative game, I would lose 1 of my Energon, which stinks because you need Energon to do some pretty cool abilities. Now, your turn is not done. You can go until you run out of resources. So in this case, I still have 2 more cards that would grant me extra movement, and I have 1 more card that grants me extra power. So I could play these cards, regardless of what it says down here. If it doesn't take effect, it doesn't matter. So like right now I haven't taken any damage, so I don't really have to worry about Fix's effects, but I do want the movement. So I could play this in order to move around the matrix and do something else. I could then spend that extra movement to flip over another card. Now this reserves card, I'll use it to flip over this card here. Now we already know what it is, but there's that technology card again. I've defeated Laserbeak, but this card does have an effect that that will work right here. It says if you control 3 or fewer Energon, you gain 1 Energon. So I gained 1 Energon from Laserbeak, but I'm also going to gain an additional Energon because I have 3 or fewer here. So I'm ending the turn netting 4 Energon for future turns. Now, the Courage card, I'm not going to be able to play it because there's nothing on the board that I can purchase, and there's not enough power on this card for me to do anything else. So at that point, I will say, my turn is done, and I can pass the turn to the next player. Now that I've announced the end of my turn, I still have 1 card left in my hand, but I can't play it because there's nothing for me to purchase, as I said. So I can do the cleanup phase. To clean up, all I have to do is discard all the cards that are left in my hand. I'm done with that now. And now I have to refill the matrix. Now we defeated Laserbeak in this scenario, so there is 1 space open on here. So we're going to take the top card of the deck, and we're going to fill any empty spaces in the matrix. You always want to refill it at the end of your turn. If there are no open spaces, you still have to take a card from the matrix. You would flip it over in that circumstance, and if it's not a Decepticon adversary or a scheme card or a boss, you will just put this into the discard pile on the side. If it is a Decepticon scheme card, or a boss, or a Decepticon adversary, you have to replace a card that's in the matrix with that card, and they're going to be out now. And then finally, you're going to draw up a new hand of 5 cards. In another scenario for being ambushed, let's say we've just flipped over our friend Scavenger here. He's not our friend. Now, me being on the card when I flip it over means he's automatically going to ambush me. Now, we take our encounter card and we look up here. Okay, so it's the same attack, it's lose 1 victory point, or Energon in this case, since we're playing in a cooperative scenario. Now, I could let this happen and I could lose 1 of my Energon tokens that I've collected throughout the game, but let's say I don't want to, or whatever the effect may be. If I have in my hand a card that has the block keyword on it, I can play this card and block whatever the effect is, so that it doesn't happen. So let's talk about a couple other scenarios where you're encountering a adversary. So in this circumstance here, we have Decepticon Scavenger has been revealed. Ratchet, our teammate, is on that card. Ironhide is sitting on top of this Decepticon scheme that's been revealed. Because Ratchet is the active player and has searched the Matrix and found Scavenger, Ratchet is the one that's going to be attacked. So what would happen is, same thing with Laserbeak, Scavenger is going to ambush Ratchet, and you just flip over an encounter card and see what it says. Now in this circumstance, it says it's going to gain 1 damage. A damage card, these cards here, these are the basic cards that we showed at the beginning of this video. Damage cards, when you gain them, they don't go into your deck. They're not like a typical deck builder that's going to clutter up your hand. Instead, they're going to be placed in front of you. Damage cards build up in a cooperative game. If you gain 5 of them, they are going to end the game because you're dead. In a competitive game, they act as negative victory points at the end of the game. So no matter what type of game you're playing, you don't want damage cards. You do have abilities to fix these cards throughout the game and get rid of them. Sometimes they can be destroyed because damage cards are considered cards that you control. Or, in some cases, you can place them back into the deck here and get them off of you. Now let's say Ratchet flipped it over, we have the encounter, and he's going to gain that damage. But Ironhide here wants to help out. So what Ironhide could do is, if they have a card like this in their hand, with the block keyword on it, focus here, Ironhide can take the Helping Hands card. It has a range of 2, and Ironhide, even though they are not on this card with Ratchet, they can play this card to block. What it'll do is stop this damage from happening, so Ratchet's super grateful, and Ironhide, because they played this card, if you block for another player, you gain 1 victory point. The cards in range, in the cooperative game, Ironhide's, instead of a victory point, is going to gain this. Ratchet doesn't take a damage card. In a competitive game, they would get a victory point token for that. Another scenario would be when you reveal a boss. Now, in this circumstance, Ironhide has revealed Soundwave. The first thing you're going to do is immediately resolve the reveal attack for the boss. So Soundwave's reveal attack is discard 1 ally you control, and then resolve an ambush. I don't have an ally in front of me, but they would go into the discard pile next to the main deck, and then we're going to resolve an ambush card. So we'd flip over, I know what that one is, so we're going to flip over this one here, and it says destroy the top card of your deck. Now that could be helpful, or it could be hurtful. But either way, you're going to take the top card of your deck, and it's just gone from the game. If it's a starter and you want to get rid of it, great, it may have helped you out. But let's say it was a super useful card that you've purchased and spent a lot of power on, now it's gone as well. But it's different for a boss than it was for a regular adversary out there. Underneath the attack is the boss reveal. Ambush hits all adversaries, regardless of where they are in the Matrix. So now, not only does Ironhide have to destroy the top card of his deck, but Ratchet does as well. That could be helpful, or it could be hurtful. You won't find out until you flip over that card. The other thing to look at when you have a boss out is that a lot of them have an ongoing ability. So the Decepticon Soundwave in this circumstance has a start of turn ability. So at the start of turn, you're going to gain 1 damage. This boss cannot be defeated if any mini-cassette Decepticons are in the Matrix. So it's a really good thing that we got rid of Laserbeak earlier. Otherwise, we would have to go around the Matrix and get rid of Laserbeak or Rumble or Ravage, whoever happens to be out, before we could actually confront Soundwave and get rid of him. In this circumstance, the start of turn damage is also a very bad thing, so we want to get rid of Soundwave as soon as possible. So how do we confront a boss? So in this scenario, I am on the Soundwave card, and I've decided to confront him. What I'm going to do is, I'm in range, I'm going to announce the power that I need to defeat Soundwave. So I've played a More Than Meets the Eye, my Helping Hands card, and a Courage card. This adds up to 6 power, which is how much Soundwave currently has. The next thing I'm going to do is shuffle and draw a Confrontation card. That's the same as this encounter deck. For every confrontation with a boss, you're going to shuffle it up so you don't know what possibly could happen here, and you're going to flip over that top card. This scenario is going to show that the confrontation here is an attack. It's going to destroy one technology I control, and if you control none, I gain 2 damage instead. Now, from my hand, I could play a block card if I want to, or I could invoke one of Ironhide's abilities here, since I'm in robot mode. His first Energon ability is to spend 1 Energon to put a block from my discard pile on top of my deck, or I could spend 2 Energon to block at a range of 0. I am at a range of 0 because I'm on Soundwave, so I'm going to say I don't want those damage cards, so I'm going to pay the 2 Energon and block that attack. So this confrontation would be resolved at that point. And you put it back into the deck there. In this circumstance, I can choose to take assist from another player if I don't have enough power. I do have enough power, so I don't need to take an assist. But in a competitive game, if I've taken any damage, I have to take an assist, which will gain bonuses for the other players, usually in the form of victory points. But either way, at the end of the confrontation, I have enough power to do it. I don't have to activate any other abilities, although I could if I want to. And then I check and see if I've got enough power, and the adversary is defeated. Once they defeat, it's just like any other. You pick it up and take a look at the bottom portion of the card here. In this case, when I defeat Soundwave, I gain 3 victory points in competitive, or 3 Energon in cooperative. So the game will end in 2 circumstances. If you cannot add any more cards to the matrix because you've depleted the deck that you've built, or if you've defeated all 3 of the Decepticon bosses. In this case, we've defeated Soundwave, then the Tier 2 boss, which would be Blitzwing or Starscream, and then the Tier 3 boss, which would be Megatron or Devastator. Once those circumstances are met, then the game will end. In the cooperative scenario that we've been playing, if the game ends and you've defeated all 3 bosses, you win. If you run out of cards to add to the matrix and you have not defeated all 3 of those bosses, well, then you all lose. If you've chose to play the game competitively, once one of those endgame triggers happens, at that point, you would add up how many victory points you've had, and the person with the most victory points is the winner. The last thing to mention in a competitive mode is placing cards into your vault. Now, at any point, if you defeat a Decepticon adversary, you can place a card into your vault. If you thwart a Decepticon scheme, you can place that card into your vault. Or if you have a relic card and you decide you no longer want to keep it in your deck cycling through, you can also place that card in your vault. What that does is lock victory points for you at the end of the game. To place in your vault, you're just going to place it face down and put it aside until the end of the game. Once you've added up all the victory point tokens that you've gained, you can then reveal the cards in your vault and add up those victory points, and goes towards your final score. And that is how you play the Transformers deck building game from Renegade Games. Now, thinking about this game as I've played it a few times, I do enjoy it. I think it's a really great, interesting take on deck building. Being able to move around the matrix, it gives a feel of a tactical miniatures game. Using the ranged abilities to help your fellow Autobots or not, it really does give a cool feel of, you're an Autobot on a battlefield trying to be tactical. I like that a lot. Some of the things didn't sit well with me, like in the box, I feel like it's missing part of the game because I know I can play those Decepticons with the expansion, but I can't right now because I don't have Decepticon character cards that I can play. So I have to wait for the other expansion in order to play as the Decepticons. And I believe that's going to take into account more of the competitive mode once the next expansion comes out, because I could play as a Decepticon and other players could play as Autobots. And that'll offer interesting dynamics, because what if one person chooses to be one Decepticon and there's 3 Autobots in play? I'm not sure what they're going to come up with for rules for scenarios like that, if there's going to be advantages or disadvantages. So I'm interested to see where that goes, but it did leave a little bit of a, I don't want to say sour taste, but it did leave me wanting more for this game, which is probably a good thing. It means I'm going to buy the expansion, but I did get a little bit of a sour taste because I feel like something was left out. But overall, I do enjoy this game. I really like the strategic component of moving around the board. The encounters deck was a lot of fun, shuffling it up and seeing how it was going to play out. I found myself also playing it solo, which works exactly the same way as cooperative mode. You can either leave in the cooperative schemes or not. Some of those schemes you actually can't get rid of in a solo mode because they require to be thwarted. You need a ally on the field. You need someone to be able to block or something like that. Something that you can't do if it's just you. You could also play as two characters if you wanted to. But I found it intriguing, the puzzle of trying to solve it. One of my favorite parts of playing solo, I played as Optimus Prime, and I used his abilities in Ironhide's ally card, which I had gotten from the Matrix, and I just boosted myself well beyond that pesky Devastator, and I was able to defeat him, even though he was greatly boosted by all the Constructicons that were out in play. So you find yourself, cheering yourself on, either getting huge defeats or really good, victories, and just overall, it was a blast to play, and I'd love to see more. Knowing from the Renegade Con, there's definitely other stuff in the pipes. They said specifically that they heard us. They want we want Beast Wars, so there might be a Beast Wars expansion out there. We might see Armada. We might see the movie verse. Hopefully not. We might see other aspects of Transformers all added to this game. So I'm very excited to see that. Where this is going to go. I think it's in good hands with Renegade, and that's really all I got at this point. So if you found this overview helpful on how to play the Transformers game, please give us a like, maybe subscribe to the channel. If you have any further questions or need clarification, feel free to comment below. But other than that, thanks for watching, and I will see you next turn.